Hello, and welcome to a new episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Each week, we dive into a blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're an architect enthusiast, have a passion for wanderlust, want to discover holistic approaches to rejuvenate your body and mind, or are intrigued to learn about Vastu Shastra with a modern approach, you've come to the right place. Join me as I sit down with inspiring, like-minded women from various walks of life. We will delve into their journeys to discuss the challenges and moments that define their paths. So sit back, relax, and let the spark of positive energy ignite your curiosity. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. Well, welcome to this middle of quarter 3 entrepreneurship podcast episode. I wanted to kind of let you guys know where I am entrepreneurship wise. I know last time I gave you an update, I was actually in Boston, and it was in the midst of just a very challenging time, I guess we can say now. Just, working on the go, having a lot of family things come up, and then just processing all of that. Now, not all of that has fully subsided, but a lot of change has happened since then. And I think a lot of what I learned while working on the go, while, focusing my, energy on family matters, so much growth happened in those few weeks. And I learned so much about how I want to run my business, what I want to prioritize. And so I thought it would be a good time for a nice little, catching up, see where I am with my company. I kind of want to share with you what projects I have going on, what phases of projects, where we are with where I am. I still sometimes say we, but where I am with the projects, and just kind of give you an idea of like what it's been like. I'm past my 1-year anniversary of having my own firm. So just want to give you a little update. So here we are. But before we jump into all entrepreneurship stuff, let's take a moment to ground down and really think of something that we are grateful for in the present moment, whatever that may be. And so for me right now in the present moment, I am really grateful for my body. I have just this huge sense of gratitude for everything that my body has been able to do for me. There has been some, personal challenges this year, and I am very grateful that my body is there to support me through some of those challenges. And just thinking about, what my body has been able to do, like even physically, and it's allowed me to practice yoga and go hiking, swimming, like I think we sometimes forget like to be grateful for our health and for our body, because our body allows us to do so much physical things, traveling, adventuring. And so I am just really grateful for my body in the present moment, everything it's allowed me to do, how it's taking care of me. It's gone on the adventures with me that I want it to, because the brain says, let's go, let's do this thing. And sometimes the body's like, I don't know if that's a good idea, or I'm tired. But I just wanted to say I'm very grateful for my body. Okay, so like I mentioned in the intro, where I was a few months ago when I let you know kind of my entrepreneurship update, which I like to do every few months. It's also kind of a nice guide for me, to check in, reflect, see where business is, because there has been a lot of changes for me on my business side since I have last recorded. And so I took a lot of what happened in May and then how I felt in June to really take inventory of my business, of where I am, what do I want to prioritize, what really is working for me, what isn't. I celebrated my 1 year anniversary of having my own firm as well. So just really taking a step back and looking at just everything and just seeing, where do I want to go in this next year of having my business. So some of the things that have, been a change. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll know that this change is already coming. I've also started to work on my newsletter. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. There's a link in the show notes. It comes out on the 7th of every month, just once a month. I do a newsletter. And I have really started to kind of pivot the newsletter into being more entrepreneurship based. And in it, I was sharing some updates. So, most recently, one of the things that I have decided to let go in my business is my Vastu Shastra consultations. I will no longer be providing Vastu Shastra consultations anymore because it is something as much fun as Vastu has brought me and how interesting it is. It just, when I took a look at, is this something that is working for my business? Is it something that is generating an income? Is this something that brings me joy? Those are all the things I have to think about with each of the things I was looking at over the last few months. And with Vastu, unfortunately, it's like I said, I love it. I love, learning about it. It's been so fun, educational. I've done some Vastu consultations now. It is just something I found that if I'm not consistent enough with it, I start to forget some of the remedies and the principles. And so one of the last Vastu consultations I was doing, I just found myself researching more and being like, oh, right, what do I have to do here? And it's just because it's so infrequent, it didn't seem to excite me as much as it used to. And I know this is something that one of the reasons I started the podcast, and it's in the intro of the podcast, right? And I know I have my 3 year anniversary of the podcast coming up, and every anniversary I change the intro of the podcast. So I know, that's a little kind of giveaway what's to come, which also I have some podcast updates as well. But that's something I've decided is Vastu has been fun. It's been such a hobby of mine, and I want to keep having joy with it. But having it be part of my business doesn't bring me joy. So it's kind of like that Marie Kondo book, I believe, like it's The Art of Joy, or Spark of Joy or something, The Magic of Joy, whatever it's called. That's kind of what I started to feel with Vastu. I'm like, if it doesn't spark joy, I have to let it go. And so Vastu Shastra consultations are no longer available. I mean, if someone really wanted to, they could absolutely reach out. I still have a project that I'm a Vastu Shastra consultant on that I will stay on. So none of that will change. I'll still see that project through all the way. But taking on any new Vastu consultations, it's just not something I am providing anymore. And so that was one of the things I've really had to let go the last few weeks. And also, one of the things that I debated letting go was the newsletter, which, if you're a subscriber, I mentioned that last month I thought this was going to be my last newsletter for a while. I also thought, is this bringing me joy? Is anybody reading this? I don't know. And I do know. I can look in the statistics. I can see who clicked on what, how many of you opened it. I mean, all of that's there. All of the data is there. But there's still that feeling of, does anybody really care? And I think sometimes as a creator, and I know I'm not like a social media creator completely, but in a way I'm creating this content. And I'm sure a lot of other content creators or podcasters may feel moments of this of, is anybody resonating with what I'm putting out there? Because at the production rate of so many of us right now, especially in I think on the creation side, not the consumer side, on the creation side, we're putting so much content out there now. And there is so much content around that we need to compete with, that we need to, put out there. And yeah, there's not even compete because there's just so much content out there. And I know, for me, I've got a podcast episode coming out every week. That's a lot to be putting out there constantly, that energy. But sometimes you're like, is anybody resonating with it? If you don't, there's that kind of hey, am I doing a good job? You don't have a boss telling you you're doing well, which is also something we can talk about in entrepreneurship. I don't have someone telling me, hey, you're doing a good job. But, because you're the boss at the end of the day. So, which little side note on that is that's definitely something Jesse and I have started to do for each other more and more. So my husband Jesse, he started his own, he's a general contractor. He started his own company. He has his own project. And that's something we started doing for each other is being like, "Hey, good job. Like, good job on that meeting. Like, hey, you really killed it at this. Like, so proud of you." Because as an entrepreneur, sometimes you need that like pat on the back, and you can give it yourself. Like I like to give myself like little high fives if I finish something, or treat myself for like an afternoon off, things like that. But there isn't that person who's telling you, "Hey, you did a good job," like you would maybe your boss or like a someone above you, a director or something like that. So that's something. But going back to the newsletter, that's something I've kind of played with on, should I keep the newsletter, should I not, is anybody reading it? And I thought, well, I really like having the newsletter, right? I kind of like writing every month. I've got a book club part of it, that's been really fun. And I really like sharing the behind the scenes of entrepreneurship. Like, really, entrepreneurship has become such a more relevant theme for me and something I am definitely shifting my newsletter towards. And if you've also noticed in the recent weeks and months, is that's the way the podcast is shifting. And that's one of the big changes with the podcast is I am shifting more towards having entrepreneurs on to be talking about entrepreneurship, to have, like, we had insurance, we had Audrey talking about insurances for architects, for entrepreneurs and architects and designers. And that's something that now my interest is focusing on. And so I never wanted to have my podcast be, this is the only topic we're going to talk about. I've always left it open for curiosity, and I've wanted it to evolve with my interests as well. So it started with Vastu. That was really one of the foundations of this podcast. And now it's evolving into more of an entrepreneurship. I'm still keeping the architecture base, of course, to it. I have my Women in Architecture series coming out in October as well. But the theme of the podcast is slowly starting to shift away from Vastu. And so that's one of the changes I have been thinking about over the last few weeks. And this wasn't any of these changes, it's not overnight. Like, I've been working on these, ideas, and I've talked to Jesse. I've been bouncing ideas back and forth with, other people on social media, some of my friends, and just being like, here's where I feel like, what do you think about this? I have my coach, Petya. And so we've also been talking, I'm like, I don't know if this isn't really resonating with me at the moment. And it's like, the great thing is it's all my decision, right? Because I am the boss of all of it. And so it's really whatever makes me excited and happy at the end of the day. And so the Vastu's gone, podcast is shifting towards entrepreneurship. That's a big update. And then there's going to be more of an update in the 3-year anniversary podcast episode. I guess I'm kind of taking away from that at the moment. But the newsletter, I'm keeping the newsletter. It's still going to be once a month, which actually, by the time this episode airs, you won't have gotten the new updated newsletter, but because that'll come out August 7th, but September 7th, there'll be another one. Is I'm changing the newsletter up a little bit. I'm actually inspired by Olivia Cleary, who was on the podcast. She's from the Clearly Collective. And some of the social media posts she has been putting on, talking about the gains and was it the pros and cons of her business. So in my newsletter, I want to do the gains and the pains of the last month in my business and kind of just share with you more and more and just have a deeper connection with you than I do on social media, because that is one thing I'm also stepping back from, is a lot of my social media content and sharing like less of my personal life. That's something I just want to take a step back just due to a lot of personal things that have been going on. I wouldn't say I'm building a wall because that just seems so, like I'm putting walls up. I don't want you guys to know anything. But there's this level of, I just don't want to share as much as I used to on Instagram specifically. I really want to just focus it more towards my business and entrepreneurship. I think I've also gained a little more followers, a little bit more popularity. And so there's just more of, I just want to kind of change the focus of it. So that kind of has to do with like social media, podcasting, my newsletter, and then now my business. So I am very proud to say that last month in July was my highest profitable month yet. And I am really proud of the projects I have going on, the work I've been doing, just everything I've been putting into my company has just brought me so, so much joy. The work I do, the clients I have has brought me so much joy amongst the shit show that is happening sometimes in life. Through some of the challenges that have been coming up in the last year, my business has just been like my happy place. And so I'm just really, really grateful for all of the clients that I have, for everybody I'm working with, and just how profitable I have been. And I'm just so excited, and I'm projecting that August is going to be even more profitable. So it's just like, oh my gosh, all these good things with the business. And that's really where my focus is going. So, with that being said, I kind of want to talk about my business, some of the projects I have that I'm working on, and some things I've also kind of learned this last few months as well. So, just to give you an idea, right now, I have 8 projects that I'm working on. All of these projects are in different stages and phases, and of course have different speeds of how they're moving. Personalities of clients are very different. So it's been very interesting, and that's one of the things I most recently have been learning on how to work with is project tracking and project scheduling, because I've come to the point in my business where I'm busy enough for myself. I think having, a few more projects, I could take on a few more projects. If I take on a few more projects, I'm going to have to hire someone to help out, mostly with CADing, drafting. I'm still my own bookkeeper, that's fine. But with a lot of the CAD stuff, I think up until this point now, a year in, I'm working on one of my biggest construction document sets now. Once I have that done, I'm going to have a standard of what I want my drawings to look like. And that's how I know I'll feel comfortable hiring someone to be able to do my CAD work. Because up until now, I've still been changing, playing around with how all the drawings are going to go, and like, the line weights and what everything's going to look like, and like my standards have still been evolving because I've been getting bigger and bigger projects. They've been more complex. And so things are just changing a little bit in that sense. But the other big thing is taking on projects and making sure I stay consistently busy. So what that means is if I sign a project on today, that project is going to keep me busy up until a certain point, because, for example, the one city I work in locally, it takes about, typically it's supposed to take 30 days for them to get you the plans back when you submit to the planning department. That isn't the case right now. It's looking more like it's going to be 6 to 7 weeks. So in the back of my mind, every time I sign up a project or I start scheduling when are my client meetings going to be, when are deadlines for planning department submittals, building department submittals, all of these submittals and all of these things, how does that span out? Because I have 2 projects that are going into that city. One I just submitted to the city. I have another project going in. And then for those 2 projects, I don't really have any billable time for the next month and a half. And so I have to think about that, like, okay, now while we wait for the plans in the city, not all cities are like this. Unfortunately, some cities are taking slower than others. This is just an example. I have other cities that get plans back to me in 5 days. So I also have to think about that. And so while the plans are out in the city for 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 weeks, what can I be doing on the project to possibly getting the project moving forward, getting some billable time? All of that has to be taken into consideration now. And that's something I've been learning. I've really been learning, how do I do all of this? When should I submit certain plans so that it makes sense for the project, it makes sense for me, it makes everything efficient. So that's definitely something I have been learning and working on. So some of the projects I have going on, I'm not going to say client names, I'm not going to say the address, I'm not going to say where they are. I'll give a brief understanding of what it is. So one is a interior remodel for a project. And this project I signed up last fall, and we're through the planning department's middle phase. And then now it's getting plans ready for the construction document phase. And so that has been an interesting project as well, because I'm working in a city that I've never worked in. And so learning the process of like, okay, if I submit the plans, and thankfully the city is digital, which most cities are becoming digital. And so how did that submittal go? So that's been really interesting. So that project is, I would say, in like the construction document phase now. And so actually I have to update in my notes. I'm going through some of my notes. I use Google Keep for all of my project tracking. So each of them has like a little color code. So I'm kind of going through it. I just wanted to let you know, like, kind of how I don't have projects all at the same phase. They're just different projects at different phases, different sizes. So this is a fairly bigger project, right? It's an interior remodel, full gut remodel of a house. And so that, I would say, is in the construction document phase. And if you don't know the phases, I'm going to provide a link in the show notes for my episode about talking about the schematic, design development, construction document phase, bidding, negotiation, all those. Provide that in the show notes if you're like, wait, Katerina, what does all this mean? Because I'm not going to have time to cover all of that. So I have one project, interior remodel. It's in the construction document phase now, putting together plans for the building department. And so I'm also working with consultants. I've got structural plans I've been reviewing, things like that. So that's one of the projects. I have another project that is going to be an addition to a house. And this project is, I signed this project in spring. So right now we went through the schematic design phase, we're in the design development phase, and the project is going to be going to the city soon. And so this project it's an addition to an existing residence. That's all I'll say about that. And so that's kind of, so as you can see, I'm in a construction document phase for one project, design development phase for another project. So it's definitely different. And then keeping in mind, every project, the team is different. Not only is the client different, but your structural engineers are different. The interior designer is. And so it's managing all of that as far as schedules as well. Because one of the things I've started to tell clients is if they go, how long is a project going to take? Or when can you get this submitted? Or when can we expect to get permit issuance? And I have been very comfortable, and these are in potential client meetings that I've been saying this is, well, it depends on a number of things. I said, first, it depends on the city, whatever the city submittal process is. That's one thing I cannot control. I just can't. That's above my control is the different jurisdictions, right? The city, the county, if you're going through the coastal commission. So if any project is on the coast, projects have to be submitted to the California Coastal Commission. So any of that, those are just completely out of my control. So that's going to be our main thing that drives our schedule. Also HOA, which I've also been working with an HOA for the first time. I worked with an HOA this past spring, and that was quite a challenge getting through that HOA submittal process. And so, which that's something now I've learned is putting that into the schedule, because I personally do not give the schedule. I don't give a schedule to clients per se. I can give a brief outline of what I think, and it'll be like, this month, I don't give out days. I don't give out days because I did this for one project and I can't be specific to the day. I can say end of the month, beginning of the month, because there's so many variables that play into it. I always admire contractors who can give good schedules because I know they have so many moving pieces that go into, getting a project from, foundation into being completely remodeled. So for me, I can't give a specific schedule, but I can say, based off of if we submit plans here and then we do this, because then you get corrections back and all of this, here's where I estimate we could do permit issuance. So the first thing I say that's out of my control is city submittals. The next thing I say is, of course, my schedule. So, what does my schedule look like? Do I have time? Like right now, I have 2 projects in the city. My schedule has opened up. I can bring on 1 or 2 projects that I can work on while I wait for the other project, right? Unless I were to hire someone. And so there's my schedule. Next thing I say is the consultant schedule. So that schedule is if you have a structural engineer that we need plans from, that's going to change our schedule at a certain point of the project, not right away at the beginning, but at a certain point, we're going to have to get on their schedule. Civil engineer, do you need them? Okay, how busy are they? When can they get drawings to me so I can review them, make sure everything is, makes sense, lines up, coordinates with my architectural, coordinates with the structural, civil, lighting, mechanical. Who else do you need? Interior designer, making sure all of that gets coordinated, landscape, all of that needs to be coordinated. So that adds time to the schedule. And then the very last thing, which first I was a little uncomfortable, it's a little awkward to say, but one of the biggest things that dictates the schedule of a project, for at least what I've experienced in my experience, is the client's design decision making capabilities. Really not even just the design, it's the decision making capabilities of a client is also going to determine the schedule. And that's something I think clients don't right away think about is when I send you plans, how soon are we going to meet? Are we going to review? Do you have revisions? Are we going to have to revise the plans? Are like, yes, this is what we want. Oh no, we want this revision, this change. All of that is going to add to the schedule. And so I've been comfortable telling clients, one of the biggest things too is going to be your decision-making capabilities. And I'm still working on how to say that even nicer, but I think really that's what it is. It's your decision-making capabilities is going to be one of the things that's really going to drive it as well, is how fast are you going to make decisions in order for me to be able to move on to the next step? Because there is a certain point, which is something I've also been experiencing in the last few weeks and few months is, I'll have so much work on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'll send out plans, I'll send out questions, I'll be like, okay, And I'll just sit there and be like, well, now I'm waiting for everybody to get back to me, whether it's the city, a consultant, a client. Now what? And so that's something as well that clients need to kind of understand, as well as they are also going to drive the schedule. And that's something I've been open about talking about. So another project I have is I am a architectural consultant for an out-of-state architect for a project. So the client is building a home locally. They're using an out-of-state architect. I am the local architect. I'm not the architect of record, which means I won't be stamping any drawings or that, but I am helping through the city submittal process. Because California has so many more code restrictions, code requirements, I'm also helping this architect navigate that. I helped bring in consultants that I referred into the project, and I'll stay on the project right now. That project is kind of going through the design development phase, and I'll probably be on during construction because I am a physical body locally. So I've also met with some consultants on site to review the project. So I'm kind of that person on site. So almost like an on site rep as well. So that's been one project I've been working on, which has been really fun. I have one project. So the very first project I ever signed up is under construction. So that project should be done in the next few weeks, probably by the time this episode airs. I would say it's nearing completion, and that was just the deck repair. And so I am very excited about that project. The scope changed a little bit during the project. Actually, no, I had two deck repairs that I signed up last summer. My very first project that finished through construction, so that was last month. So in like July, yeah, it was back in July. Yeah, it was back in July. Okay, good. I'm kind of forgetting what month it is. It is August. So back in July, I finished my very first deck repair project, construction all the way through, done, everything, final check received. I'm out. This is great. Client is happy. So that happened last month. This other project, same kind of deck repair, this is still under construction. So I have a project going under construction, right? So I've got, some in design development, like I said, some in construction document phase, and then I've got some under construction. Then I have another project that I'm working on that is in the design development phase. So this right now is at the city, and it is an ADU, so an accessory dwelling unit, which this is a term, I don't know, I guess it's also in Texas, but in California, there's a housing crisis. And so in order to build homes faster, the California state is, and this isn't like word for word, okay? I know there's all sorts of other like ways to describe this, but this is my understanding of an accessory dwelling unit. I know there's a lot of politics around it as well, but accessory dwelling unit, it's like a second unit on a property. So what the California government is saying is, okay, if you own a property and you have space, depending on the zoning requirements, you can build a secondary unit that can be rented out. It's like an in-law suite, if you will. So it could be attached, detached, so it could be next to that building, it could be attached, second story addition, things like that. There's certain different requirements. Each city has its own requirements on what does it allow, what are the zoning requirements, all of that stuff. Where, it can't be in the front yard setback, it could be in the back, all of those things. So that's very specific. But so it's an accessory dwelling unit. So I'm doing a detached style. Oh, I guess I should say what style of architecture all of these homes are in, because that is also something. I know I was on a whole design podcast, and I had Elise and Emily on my podcast where we talked about, you're working with different designs all the time. So actually, let me back up. So the very first project I talked about, which is an interior remodel, that is more of a mid-century modern home. The project that I talked about, that's the addition, I would say that's that's an interesting style, would I say? I would say it's like a little cottagey with a little mid-century modern. So like the addition is more modern. The house itself was built in the 1930s or 40s, so it's a little bit more cottagey. And then the addition is a little bit more modern. The project that I am consulting on for the out-of-state architect, I would say, is like a contemporary, modern, just like contemporary home. Deck repair is a deck repair. This ADU is an artisan craftsman style home, which I'm actually really excited about. I worked on an artisan craftsman style home back in Chicago when I was working at a previous firm, and I really enjoyed that style. Surprisingly, I would never build it for myself. I would never live in the space, but designing it, like that Frank Lloyd Wright inspired, I don't know, it was just so fun, like getting into those details. It's definitely not something I would ever build for myself, but it's just an artisan craftsman style kind of cottagey home. And then I have a new project that I recently signed, and this project is definitely in the schematics. Well, we finished schematic design. We're now in design development, and it's got multiple phases to this project. So right now we're kind of doing like a pergola, then we're going to do kind of a change of a carport, and then eventually there will be an addition on the home. And so that's a project that has different phases. So right now I'm going through, and that's something too, talking with clients is like kind of figuring out a strategy of, okay, because a lot of clients are like, we want to do so much to our home. What should we process first? And so that was something looking with the clients like, okay, if we submit this phase, what are the city requirements going to be? Can I submit over the counter? Is it going to be easy? Do I have to submit it for a long period of time? What is your schedule? What is the priority of when you want? Because certain things can be built as we're processing certain things through the city, right? So let's say the homeowner wants to fix, I don't know, fix their garage. And that's something they're like, and it's a detached garage. They want to fix the garage first. We'll work on the garage. We'll get that ready, permitted so the contractor can start working. And then we'll get the rest of the house, going through the city so that when they're done with the garage, then, maybe they can start on the house. And that also takes into consideration the general contractor, but there's a lot that goes into that. And I would say this home is more, I would say like cottagey, yeah, almost like a little New England cottagey-esque. It would be the style. I know that's not really a really good way to describe it. Then, of course, I have the Vastu project that is in Canada. So I'm working on that. And that right now is, so we've been in the design stages. And so it's still, because my contract, I'm not licensed in Canada, which actually, if you're listening, NCARB, I guess now there's reciprocity, which allows you to, like, if you're licensed in the US, you can now get your license in the UK, Australia, New Zealand. It just came out with NCARB that you can get your license in Canada and Mexico, I believe, if you have a US license, but there's certain requirements. And I think it was you have to have your license for at least 10 years in the US in order to be licensed in Canada, which I'm not there yet. But this project will only stay in schematic design because I'm only doing the schematic design for the project. And then lastly, I have a project that is under construction as well. This was mostly an interior remodel, more cosmetic than anything. So there's some changes going on with structural. There's more landscaping going on. So for me, there was less architectural stuff. There was coordination with a structural engineer because of some of the walls they wanted to open up. But that was just pretty much so that project's under construction as well. And that I would say is more of like a traditional style home. And so, as you can see, projects are in different phases. And if you're not in architecture, you might be like, well, that's really overwhelming, like trying to manage and juggle it all. And this is very typical. I would say every place I've worked, I've always had projects going on in different phases. And so it's something you just kind of become accustomed to. It's only once in a while I've seen that, you'll be assigned one project and then that's the only project you work on, which actually ended up happening to one of my colleagues at a previous firm I worked at. And they got a project and I had like maybe 3 or 4 I was kind of managing throughout different phases. And I remember talking to him and I was like, don't you get bored working on the same project every day? But it needed someone with his level of expertise. It was an intense, complex project. And he's like, I actually like it. I just feel like I can like wrap my hands around it and just, really just like get into the details of this project. I was like, fair enough. I was like, fair enough. Because it does make it fun because you're always working on something different. And if you're just like, some days I'll be like, oh, I feel like being really creative. So I make sure I do the creative stuff when the creative juices are flowing. Or I'm like, today, let's do some CAD drawings. Let's get some detailed drawings or like all of that. So there's always something different going on, which I really, really enjoy. And so that's what I've got going on. I've got some proposals out as well. I'm waiting to hear back from to see because right now I'm taking on more projects because I have the time, I have the space to take it on, the energy to take it on because of everything that I just mentioned about city submittal processes and things like that. So all in all, that's kind of where I'm at with the business. So I hope you found this episode insightful. If you're kind of like, hey, what's Katerina working on? What are some changes coming up, entrepreneurial? So I kind of touched on those at the beginning of the episode. I wanted to share what kind of projects I'm kind of working on. And then just let you know, like, these are the things that are, going on behind the scenes and just thinking about, different systems. And, there's that I've started to really think about hiring someone if I'm not there. Back in May and June when I had all of this travel, all of this family stuff going on, I was like, I need to hire someone right now. I can't take this on. Well, all of the dust kind of settled. Now I have the space, the time, the energy to take it all back on now. So I'm not thinking about hiring someone, but it's definitely something I have to think about, especially if I sign, like, let's say, fingers crossed, I sign these next 2 projects that I have the proposals out for. What does that look like for my schedule? What does that look like for the other projects, right? And then, of course, I also, during this time, I've had a meeting with my mentor, which we like to check in every once in a while. And so that was really helpful because I was able to talk about my experience with, everything I've really shared in the last episode of entrepreneurship, which of course I'll provide a link in the show notes if you want to catch back on me, tuning in from Boston. So what that all kind of looked like. So it's been a lot of pivoting, of changing things, feeling just what is bringing me joy, what's not bringing me joy, and really focusing on, if this excites me, do I want to do it? And is that something I'm interested in? There's projects, I guess I can tease it in this episode. I'm trying to think schedule wise. I guess I can tease it. There's projects, that I'm working on that aren't architectural. There's, of course, so I had the ebook launch earlier this year. I am thinking about turning that into a video course. The question is, of course, of finding time to video the content and all of that. So I'm putting that kind of together of what that's going to look like. I did give myself this summer to just kind of, like I said in I think there's my mid-year check-in with my word of the year, create. I was like, I want to give myself like a break over summer and just kind of have fun and be creative. And I have been able to do that. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, it's been like a month in and I'm like, okay, I'm so excited to get some stuff going. But I'm definitely still honoring that space of just being like, no, I want to have fun and just like, I don't want to be tied to a computer like every weekend. I'd rather kind of do that in the fall with all the recording and stuff because it is gorgeous weather this year in Southern California. We really didn't have June gloom. It has been gorgeous, hot, sunny. I mean, we don't have to go, anywhere for vacation this summer because I live in a vacation spot. But another project I'm working on, I'm thinking, can I share this? I've briefly shared it in my newsletter. And I think I'm going to be a tease. That's where I'm going to leave it. If you subscribe to my monthly newsletter, that's where you're going to see this project idea I've got coming. It's going to launch this fall. I had my first initial design meeting this past week, and I'm just really excited about it. I kind of had a moment. I was like, I'm a little scared because this is something I've never done. And I'm like, can I do it? And I feel like, you know what? I feel like I can do anything. I'm not really too worried. I'm not worried about failure. If you've been following my journey, I'm not worried about, fear of failure. Just after all these exams and failing them, I'm just like, what could go wrong? So that's kind of, I think this will be a nice, fun thing. So I can't wait to share that with you as well. So that is that. You know where to find me on Instagram and all that. So I hope you're liking the guest episodes that have been coming up. I'm really grateful for all of the guests. I have a few more recordings coming up this month, and I'm just excited to be sharing more with you about my entrepreneurship journey. All right, thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.